You're listening to Workplace Perspective, an employment law podcast raising the bar at workplaces everywhere. Workplace Perspective is a regular podcast series for employers and employees focusing on education, training, and the law to help organizations of all sizes develop and maintain successful workplace relationships. The opinions expressed by guests on Workplace Perspective are their own and should not be considered legal advice. And now, here's your host, Teresa McQueen.
Thank you, James, and welcome everyone to Workplace Perspective, where we are striving to raise the bar at workplaces everywhere. In honor of Veterans Day, we have two special guests. First, we'll be talking with Chris Johnson. Chris is the president and CEO of Nation's Finest, an organization whose mission is to support America's military veterans and their families with a comprehensive approach to housing, health, and employment, helping them to achieve self-sufficiency and to reach their full potential. In the second half of our show, we're going to be joined by U.S. Navy veteran Jason Henry. Jason is the Performance Improvement and Innovation Director at Nation's Finest, and he's going to be sharing his first-hand experience as a veteran who's reintegrated into civilian life after leaving the military. And he's going to share some of his story and some of the stories from the people that he's helped at Nation's Finest. It's going to be a great show. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Workplace Perspective has a new website. Visit us at www.workplaceperspective.com. Check out our new look, including our featured guests and archive sections. Share us with your friends and colleagues to help us continue to raise the bar at workplaces everywhere.
Welcome back to our listeners, and welcome to Workplace Perspective, Chris Johnson and Jason Henry.
Thanks for inviting us. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you both on the show. So, as I always do, I'm going to ask you both to do a little bit of a self-introduction. Chris, let's start with you. Why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm very honored to be the CEO and president of Nation's Finest. I've been involved in nonprofit leadership for over 30 years, and my dad served for 33 years in the U.S. Army Air Corps and then the Air Force. So my job is to make sure the team like Jason get the tools they need to be successful on behalf of those who are our nation's finest.
That's great. Well, it's always funny, people always, of course, thank our veterans for their service, which we do immensely. But I think there's also some thankfulness to be had for the family members of those servicemen.
Absolutely. And we hear that phrase often, and the veterans hear that phrase and are appreciative of it. But what we try to do is actually do things to speak to that phrase and actually bring it to life, as opposed to just saying thank you. We try to make sure that they get back on a pathway, they and their families get back on a pathway toward a normal, successful life.
Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Nation's Finest?
Yeah, thanks for having us. So basically, as the Performance Improvement and Innovation Director, I get to look for new and fun ways to serve our veterans. I say fun because it's always an exciting prospect to look out into the veteran community, try to identify a need that isn't being met, and then see if we at Nation's Finest can come up with a way to fill that need. It's a lot of research and data, internal and external, but seeing something come together that was once just a bud of an idea into a real program that's bringing veterans into the fold of the sort of Nation's Finest family is really fun and really, really satisfying.
I think that's great. And if I didn't say it, thank you for your service as well. I want to let's just talk about what you guys are seeing, the people that you're dealing with, what the organization does to help them. If you want to jump in, I'll just hand it off to the two of you, and let's just hear about what you do.
Well, Jason, do you want to give a little bit of background and experience from when you were a site director and the types of folks you saw coming in? And I can give a direct story as to somebody who is now a board member who started out as somebody struggling for themselves. So, Jason, if you don't mind, why don't you take it first, and then I'll jump in right after you.
So a lot of what we do is focused on veterans who are kind of in one of the worst places they can be, whether they're, struggling with substance abuse or mental health issues. They find themselves homeless, lost contact with the family support systems or community support systems that are out there. We have the honor and privilege of sort of bringing them into our programs, giving them some structure, giving them some tools and support, helping them reconnect with what they really truly want. Because I don't believe that anybody wants to be homeless. It's a consequence of many factors. And we help to try to help them to rebuild what they have disconnected with, and helping them to get back into kind of living the life that they want to live. I think that a lot of times folks can sort of misconception that programs are designed to force a solution down the client, into the client's pathway. And that's really not what we are set out to do. We're trying to get them to live the best possible life that veteran and that veteran's family wants to live and move forward with in the future. So it's providing those supports. And it can look a lot of different ways. Whether it's employment and training, whether it's connecting with other community partners and services out there, getting benefits through the Department of Veterans Affairs, providing them a roof over their head and 3 meals a day, providing them with counseling, whatever it takes. We've always considered ourselves a resource center, insofar as we have our programs, but we will connect our veterans and their families with any service out there that will help them become successful. So it's a community awareness project. It is relationships building, and it's, of course, the direct services that we provide.
I think that's great. I love what you said about making it unique to each individual. That takes a lot. It takes a lot of effort. But I think that people forget that. And you find it in all kinds of things, people who want to help the homeless, and they don't think about, oh, this would be great. I remember reading something about putting together, people put together bags that you can hand someone, when you come up on the freeway and there's someone standing there on the freeway and you can hand them something. But the things they were putting into these bags were things that, like, these people, it didn't help them, right. Food that was too hard to eat, or, stuff that could put them in danger, giving them something that was of too much value that might put them in a compromising position or endanger their lives or something. But to think about what it is that each individual needs, like you said, to lead their best life, not what you think they should be doing or Exactly. What you think is best for them from even just an organizational standpoint. I think that's awesome. I love that focus. Super important.
Well, and I know there's a program, especially in California, but it's nationwide, with a lot of agencies where they talk about housing first. I don't know if you've heard that term mentioned before, but even with employment, we've learned that making sure they're stable in their living situation is the very first thing you have to accomplish. Because yes, having a job is critical, but if you don't have a place to stay, if you don't have a place to go to after that job that's consistent and stable, it's an issue. So that's why homelessness has been a huge part of what we do. I mean, you've got, in just last year, you had over 580,000 unemployed veterans. Over 10% of those folks were on the street. So it's like, okay, those two things go together. So that's why we didn't want to forget them. If I can I tell an early story about the early days?
Of course.
Nation's Finest was founded originally as Flower of the Dragon. And that was a term that this group of Vietnam veterans said, what resonated with them. And so that's why they liked it. But as those of us that are old enough to remember, Vietnam veterans were not treated very nicely when they came home. In fact, some were spit on, etc. And these veterans found each other in a bar and said, we got to do something about it. And so they came together to fix it. And they ended up literally just setting up a pool table in the back of another business and inviting veterans, especially Vietnam era veterans, to come and play pool. Well, one story that directly reflects to what you're talking about is they also started providing some job placement within the city and for veterans. And the person in charge of that kept coming over to one of our founders and saying, the veterans just aren't coming in. We don't know why. We've got job opportunities for them, et cetera. And they said, well, because they don't feel comfortable just walking into a government building and, saying, hey, I need a job. They've been trained to be self-sufficient. They've been trained to be strong, but they do enjoy hanging out with each other and just relaxing and enjoying themselves. Come on down next Tuesday and we'll let them know that there's going to be somebody here for job placement. Well, that gentleman showed up at that pool table and for several hours, it had a line of veterans around the block of people coming in to meet with that job placement because why? They felt comfortable in that environment. And that's what organizations like ours do. We even ran a print shop at one time because we said, okay, let's train them in how to do that. Let's get them doing that. So the key, and Jason alluded to it, is you need to connect with each individual story, find out what's going on with them. And veterans working with veterans was the ideal way to do that because they understand each person's challenge and dilemma. And we've got people now in Sacramento, as example, that are veterans looking to us to help establish some sort of agriculture training program so that they can own their own ag businesses. So people need to recognize, even though you've got, 500,000 unemployed, that's 500,000 very smart, very talented individuals that when put on the right path are going to be some of the best employees you could ever hire.
Let's talk about that for a second. I think that people forget that aspect of it, that transition, those skills that you acquire in the service, no matter where you're at. It's almost like they say, a bachelor's degree says something about you. But what it says is that you and everybody else that got a bachelor's degree have at least the same training on to a certain standard. It's across the board. But I don't think people understand that or correlate that with regard to military service, because there's something about being in the military across the board that gives you a certain type of training, a certain mindset, a certain, I want to say standard, but I don't think that's the right word. You know what I'm saying? That gives you something unique just from being in the military that really correlates. So talk to me about what you see in that regard. Either one of you.
Go ahead, Jason. You're the military expert on this call.
Expert. That's hilarious, CJ.
Hey, man, take it where you can get it.
Yeah. No, I think that what you're alluding to it is a really important concept. You're right. If someone spends 4 or 6 years in college, they walk away with a piece of paper, and it's important. It does demonstrate a certain level of expertise in a given field, or at least, as you said, that baseline of knowledge. What our veterans get is not as obvious to translate into civilian employment, but the baseline, regardless of the branch of service or when you served, there is an element of dedication. Every single veteran who ever served in the military had at some point or another stand there and raise their hand and commit to the service, to give every up into the ultimate sacrifice. Every veteran made that promise. Every veteran, regardless of branch of service or time served, had to go through boot camp. And in boot camp, you learn more or less the same things. The branches vary in their focus, but everybody learns teamwork. Everyone learns dedication. Everyone learns the skills to and mindset to overcome obstacles and challenges, think creatively. And these skills, I think, are easily applied to any position within the civilian workforce. And this is what veterans do. Again, regardless of your job designation in the service, everybody learns to work together. Everyone is focused on mission-driven outcomes. And so you leave the military service and, veterans want to still pursue those same ideals. They want to get the job done. They want to do it to the highest possible standards, and they want to work with a solid team.
I love it. I do think that people overlook that. I think it goes to what your mindset is about someone who served in the military. And sometimes that mindset is not accurate. This idea that, everyone comes back damaged and everyone should be concerned about hiring someone from the military because they could be unpredictable. They could be this, but they forget the positive aspects of that. And that while people do come back with issues, it doesn't stop their ability to function.
That's right.
Right. And they can still, have all those wonderful attributes that you talked about and be a great positive focus in the workplace.
Well, and one of the other attributes, and I know numbers aren't fun for radio, so I'll try not to use them. But what's a very interesting statistic is veteran versus non-veteran unemployment. There are less veterans by percentage unemployed than there are the general population. And that says something. Although we just talked about having 580,000 plus unemployed veterans, by percentage, that's lower, which means veterans are, as Jason alluded to, they've got that commitment, they've got that dedication, they've got that perseverance to get there, do the job, and make sure it gets done right. And so I think, as you alluded to, it's almost the opposite of what you said. They don't come in damaged. They come in with an attribute that is hard to train, which is dedication, persistence, etc.
Absolutely. And to such a high degree. I think it's amazing. All right. We're getting the break signal. So we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, more from Nation's Finest. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Take a step toward bringing our country and community together. Start a meaningful conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
If you enjoyed today's show, do this. Share us, like us, give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It means a lot to us, and it ensures more people tune in and raise the bar at workplaces everywhere.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
Or if that resume was from someone who
worked 12-hour shifts at the recycling company with my dad, who's 72. That taught me a work ethic that I carry with me every day.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone.
Growing up where I did, a lot of things could have gotten in the way of my goals, but I learned to push through, and that's what I bring to work every day.
So maybe it's time we look beyond the resume and look to Grads of Life. Discover new ways to develop great talent that are so much more than what's on paper at gradsoflife.org. A public service announcement brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone. We are talking with Chris Johnson and Jason Henry of Nation's Finest about what their organization does for veterans. We've had some great information. What I'd like to do right now is sort of switch and kind of talk a little bit to you, Jason, if you would just share your experience about coming out of the service, looking for work, what that was like, and what it's like for the people that you help.
Yeah, no problem. So when I got out of the Navy, like many veterans, I think the last thing I really wanted to do was to be a part of any sort of military organization where I just wanted to grow my hair long, grow my beard, wear whatever I wanted to wear, not wake up at 5 a.m, things like that. And so, I did that. I moved up to Humboldt County and lived out in the mountains for a long time and just sort of escaped for a while. over the years, I did odd jobs here and there. I worked as a event security for a long time. I worked in office settings. I did low-level counseling for at the Humboldt State University for transferring students. And what I realized, it's an interesting story. We had a woman there who was the Humboldt State University's veterans. I can't remember her title, but she basically authorized all of the GI Bill benefits for students. And she and I became friends. And so we started talking more and more about veterans. And I started realizing that there was something that was really missing in my life. And I couldn't really put my finger on it until I moved on from working at the college, and I started working for the Employment Development Department as a vet rep. And so my position was basically to interface with veterans and help them get jobs. And when I moved into that position, I suddenly had this epiphany of what that giant hole in me was, which was that I was disconnected from all of my veteran brothers and sisters out there. When I started engaging with folks who were speaking my language, who I could talk to about what it was like in boot camp or being out at sea or, being in different countries and stuff like that, and folks who had the same experiences, it became this really just sort of cathartic lifestyle where I knew that people understood at least a part of my life.
Right.
I stayed at the Employment Development for a little while, only less than a year actually, before and during that time I was working with the Nation's Finest branch up in Eureka, California, and I developed some friendships there and partnerships. Basically, the executive director recruited me over to the Nation's Finest side of the house, and as CJ said earlier, the culture was so strong with this veterans helping veterans that I felt immediately like I was home, if that makes any sort of sense. It wasn't just a
absolutely.
job, it became like my purpose, so I would wake up in the morning and be able to say to myself, wow, what veterans do I get to serve today? Where am I going to find these folks? Seeing veterans come into our programs, it's an amazing transition to watch. When you can have a homeless veteran come in with nothing, not having been able to shower or not having any food to eat, being cold, you can bring them in and immediately give them a hot meal. You can give them a place to sleep. You can give them some case management and start helping them work through things, showing them solutions and giving them hope. Hope is probably the most important element of what we do, which is just showing someone that, it doesn't have to be this way. Everybody's made mistakes. Everybody's had tough times. Everybody can recover, and we're here to help. And I always like to talk about how you see a veteran come in and maybe 2 weeks later, maybe 3 weeks later, all of a sudden you see them wearing their old Army hat.
Oh, yeah.
And they're starting to take pride, and you start hearing them sort of ribbing each other about their branches and stuff, which is like something that every veteran likes to do. Of course their branch is the best branch, et cetera, et cetera. Right. When you start seeing those things happening, you know that people are healing. It's funny. I used to say that every veteran coming into especially when I was a site director and I was overseeing multiple programs, and I'd talk to our staff and say, every veteran who comes in here is our veteran. Right. They belong to us. It's our responsibility to do whatever it takes to get them back on the path that they want to be on. And I think that's something that's carried through, and it's a part of the Nation's Finest culture, is that they're our veterans. Doesn't mean that we are like taking any sort of real ownership or anything like that, but in a way we are, because we're saying, you know what, we are here and we're going to do whatever it takes. You see the results, you create a community. And again, someone who's been away from that sort of community and can come in and talk to somebody who's got a high level of veterans cultural competencies, again, can speak the language, knows what the, rank insignias mean, knows what different jobs are, knows the difference between rating and rate and MOS and all these other things, can actually speak to someone sitting across the desk from them using those language. It builds rapport immediately. Yeah. And it's this mutual respect. So it's not just a case manager telling someone to fill out a treatment plan. It's a case manager and a veteran working together to develop that plan and working together to complete the steps on that plan that they both come up with and agreed to.
You made so many wonderful points in there. The ones that are sticking in my mind is, this idea that you felt disconnected. And it's true. It's like, you get out of the service, you don't think about that. You want to get as far away from it all as you possibly can. But then at some point you realize, well, that's shutting off a huge part of your life if you're not able to have that shared experience. It's like, for the rest of us, it's like you start talking pop culture with somebody of your own generation, you're immediately at ease and you've got a level, you can connect on. And it's awesome. So I can see how that would be great. You realize that was missing from your life, this idea that you had this whole huge part of your life that you wanted to share. Now that you're ready to share it, right? You served, you went and you got your alone time. And now you're like, okay, there's something missing here. So I think that's hugely important and just great. Thank you for sharing that. We're not a political show, but I do think that we've gotten a little bit away from this sense of what it means at the heart to be an American. And I think that we learned so much from the Vietnam experience that I think we all need to have a sense of this idea that these are our veterans and that part of their service, it's not just getting people to recruit, getting them to serve, appreciating that service and what they do. And okay, you're done. Thank you very much, right? Part of that experience and part of our civilian support shouldn't stop the minute somebody stops service because it translates to so many other areas. You guys, I appreciate you coming on so much. I thank you for sharing your time and your experience in our last few seconds. If you have any final thoughts, any words of wisdom, any tips you want to lay out there on our listeners, I'd love to hear it. Chris, why don't we start with you?
Mine would be to make sure that you reach out to agencies such as ours if you are looking for employees, because obviously we've got access to some amazing people. And the other is if you are a veteran and you are struggling with any of the issues we talked about today, it's okay to reach out to what the term is battle buddy or somebody else that you and just say, hey, can we chat a little bit and reconnect? And on Veterans Day, I know we celebrate the veterans and recognize them, but sometimes it's better just to pick up the phone and make a call. And if you're one of those people that isn't receiving a call, we'd love to talk to you. As Jason says, one of the things that gets me emotional every time he does it is when he says our veteran, and I hope he never, ever changes that.
Me too.
He says my veterans, actually.
Me too. How about you, Jason? Any thoughts for the future? Any words of wisdom?
I think CJ really said it very nicely. I think that, thoughts for the future, we're just always looking for veterans to become part of our organization as well, looking for ways that we can do more for our communities.
I love it. Well, again, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and your wealth of information. You can learn more about Nation's Finest by visiting nationsfinest.org. That's nationsfinest.org. You can also connect with Chris or Jason by visiting our website at workplaceperspective.com. I want to also thank our listeners, my radio angels, James and the Knave at Night, and our Workplace Perspective team extraordinaire, our executive producer, Paul Roberts, our associate producer, Melissa DeLacy, with music provided by the very talented Stephen Versaloni. Thank you all for joining us on Workplace Perspective. And until next time, keep raising the bar.